In January 2006, 5 months prior to the 2006 FIFA World Cup, the late Sven Eriksson was announced to be departing the England national team manager job after the conclusion of the tournament. Having presided over a mixed tenure in charge of the Three Lions, which saw the last 16 exit at the 2002 World Cup and a quarter-final exit at Euro 2004, it would end up being scandal, not results, that played the biggest part in his departure announcement. Just weeks earlier, undercover News of the World journalist Mazhar Mahmoud had convinced Eriksson that he was a wealthy Arab on the verge of purchasing Aston Villa. And in an undercover sting, Mahmoud recorded Eriksson admitting he would be willing to leave for the fake Aston Villa job in the event that England win the World Cup. The FA shortly after this expose confirmed he would be leaving whatever the result in Germany, giving them ample time to find a suitable replacement for England's next era. In the meantime, despite a star-studded, dubbed Golden Generation, England yet again underperformed at the 2006 World Cup. They topped their group, though that didn't tell the whole story. It was an own goal that gave England a 1-0 victory over Paraguay. Trinidad and Tobago held them for 83 minutes before the Three Lions eventually broke the deadlock, and a draw with Sven's homeland of Sweden rounded out their opening three. It was only a David Beckham free kick that was the difference between themselves and Ecuador in the last 16 before their tournament ended with a penalty shootout defeat after Rooney's controversial sending off. The pundits were scathing in their assessment of Sven's 5-year period in charge of England. Regardless of the sting, it felt clear that England needed to head in another direction. The FA were clear which direction they wanted to go. They wanted an experienced head. They wanted someone who had won the World Cup. They wanted the man that knocked them out in the last 3 tournaments. That man was Felipe Scolari, World Cup winner with Brazil and current manager of Portugal. There was just one small problem. He didn't want the England job. After talks with the FA, he cited 2 main problems. The media, who had been camped outside his house during discussions, and the FA themselves, who had pushed Scolari to accept the job before his 2006 World Cup campaign with Portugal. Ultimately, the Brazilian was flattered, but majorly put off by the intensity of the actors around him. It had also left the FA with egg on their face after their overconfident public pursuit of Scolari, which saw their advances rebuffed. The FA were thus forced to switch their attention towards their other list of candidates. Sam Allardyce, Martin O'Neill, Alan Kirbishley, Gus Hiddink were all options, but none hit the previously defined criteria of experience and accolades that Scolari had. In the end, it would be another candidate who would find himself the victor in the run-in to be the next England manager. A man who had been assistant manager to Sir Alex Ferguson when Man United won the treble. A man who had taken Middlesbrough to a European final. And was the man who had assisted Sven at both Euro 2004 and the 2006 World Cup. It was none other than lovable redhead Steve McClaren. The reaction to his rival was one of general disappointment. The FA tried to spin his appointment as one of a man who knows the squad, that his continuity would be a major plus for the England team. The fans, however, they did want change. They didn't want a continuation of the failure they had seen over the last 5 years. And worse yet, they had been teased with that change. The fans believed they were getting a FIFA World Cup winner, not a Carling Cup winner. Nevertheless, McClaren was the England manager, and work was well underway to put his project into action. Incoming to succeed himself as assistant manager was Terry Venables, the popular former England manager who was installed to quell fears of inexperience in the ranks. His next decision was whether or not he'd choose to change the captain. Incumbent captain was David Beckham, who despite his previous villainous status, owing to his red card at the 1998 World Cup versus Argentina that ultimately led to England's failure, was now immensely popular, following his last-minute free kick in 2001 against Greece that saw England qualify for the 2002 World Cup in the last minute. At the time, Golden Balls was 31 years of age, still playing regularly for Real Madrid, albeit his performances at the 2006 World Cup were mixed to say the least, which led to Beckham stepping down as captain. McClaren did not try to persuade him to remain in post, as he was keen to both assert his authority and make a clean break from the Sven era, and took the decision to appoint Chelsea centre-half John Terry as his new captain. This would not be the end of the Beckham saga though, as when time came for McClaren to pick his first England team, he chose to omit the right midfielder completely from his squad. Speaking on his decision, McClaren stated that whilst he had great respect for David, he wanted to change things and go in a different direction, though he did leave the door open for him to return down the line. Other senior internationals such as David James and Sol Campbell were also dropped for similar reasons. Qualifying for Euro 2008 was first on the agenda for McClaren's men, with his side drawn into Group E alongside Andorra, Croatia, Estonia, Israel, Macedonia and Russia. Minnows Andorra were first up for the Three Lions, with the match taking place at Old Trafford, with the new Wembley still under renovation. A 4-4-2 diamond was deployed by the manager, which saw Gerrard replace Beckham on the right hand side with a big man little man strike force of Crouch and Defoe. England would stroll to victory in this one, winning the match 5-0, making it the perfect start for Steve McClaren, but there were certainly tougher tests to come. Next would be a trip to Skopje, the capital of Macedonia, for the new man's first trip on the road. Peter Crouch's fine goal scoring form continued as he notched his 11th England goal in just 14 caps, as the Three Lions avoided a late equaliser scare to hang on to victory in this one. 2 wins from 2 was the perfect start for McClaren's new look England side. The next international window the following month saw England first welcome Macedonia to Old Trafford before jetting off to Zagreb for what was expected to be McClaren's toughest test yet. And any hopes of a sauntering win over Macedonia were thwarted as England flattered to deceive, leading to a rather dreary goalless draw. The performance had been flat, lacklustre. Had Macedonia nicked it, it wouldn't have been that much of a shock. A tactical reshuffle saw McClaren line up his men in a 3-5-2 with Carragher, Terry and Ferdinand at the back, Cole and Neville on the sides, a staunch midfield three of Carrick, Parker and Lampard, with Rooney and Crouch leading the line. Yet again though, England enjoyed much of the possession in the first half, but they were static and lethargic once again. Croatia were the team who always looked like scoring and took the lead on the hour mark as Arsenal striker Eduardo da Silva headed over Paul Robinson, who had been caught in no man's land. A second followed within 10 in the most embarrassing way, as Neville's back pass to Robinson bobbled over the keeper's foot and rolled into the net. McClaren made desperate changes in an attempt to quell the tide, but Croatia continued on their ascent. The final whistle ending the match at 2-0 would prove to be fortuitous to England, who were being majorly outplayed. The memory of that match would be the comical own goal, but in reality the real story was that McClaren looked every bit out of his depth trying to coach this England side. The next 2 internationals would provide respite for the flailing England and a chance for McClaren to experiment with his side as they took on friendly matches away to the Netherlands and at home to Spain. The trip to Amsterdam saw the manager switch his system once more, this time to a 4-3-3, with slight bemusement as Andy Johnson lined up on the right wing. In spite of this, England played well in this one, and when Rooney opened the scoring just before half time, it was nothing short of deserved. The second half saw England continue to control proceedings, but promptly threw away their victory with just 5 minutes to go as a defensive mix-up was capitalised upon by Rafael van der Vaart. The result though was of little importance. The performance was certainly the best in months. Debutant Micah Richards had burst onto the scene with his display, and McClaren responded by never playing 4-3-3 with England again. The match versus Spain saw the Three Lions revert to type as they again amended, this time to a 4-2-3-1, which saw England chasing shadows for the full 90 minutes. Iniesta's goal on the hour mark came later than expected, but the England performance was dire, leading to many fans already calling for the manager to go. Of course though, the FA are notoriously patient with managers, and McClaren's job was safe as the impending March window approached and qualifiers with Israel and Andorra were next on the agenda. With Ashley Cole suspended, Carragher slotted into left back as England pivoted tactically back to the 4-4-2 they had played in their goalless draw with Macedonia. The same formation yielded the same result, as once again the Three Lions could not be rallied. Frustrations were visible as McClaren's like-for-like substitutions posed little threat. The manager was defiant that no one qualified for a major tournament in March, but at this stage England were 5 points behind Croatia, 3 behind Russia, and were tying Israel for third, with only the top 2 qualifying. A trip to micronation Andorra was next, and a chance to banish the doubters. However, when the half-time whistle sounded and England were goalless with a nation who sat 163rd in the world rankings, the fans were incandescent. The turning point McClaren had hoped would come with this result only made it worse. England did go on to win this match 3-0, with David Nugent scoring the best debut goal you will ever see, but the reaction afterwards was telling. McClaren pleaded with the fans to get behind his team before concluding, "Gentlemen, if you want to write whatever you want to write, you can write it, because that's all I'm going to say, thank you," and then walked right out of there. Rightly or wrongly, the manager had put his stake in the grass, and that was that. The 4-4-2 was here to stay. Next up was the first England match at the new Wembley, a friendly with Brazil and a potential morale raiser ahead of a return to their qualification cycle. Fans' calls had been answered and McClaren had to take a climb down as he recalled David Beckham to his squad. And his impact was immediate. A trademark free kick was nodded in by John Terry to mark the first England goal in their new digs. Sadly, another feature of McClaren's team was their ability to throw away leads, as Diego became the first opposition player to score at Wembley in the 90th minute. A trip to Estonia followed and a chance to right the wrongs of the first half of 2007. With just one win in 7, the start from England was sheepish to say the least. But returning man Beckham was in fine form again, providing twice in this one as a comfortable 3-0 win ensued. Despite still sitting in 4th after this match, the outlook looked brighter for the Three Lions, with 4 of the last 5 qualifiers to take place at Wembley. First though was the arrival of Germany, a battle with an old enemy of England in a friendly. The Three Lions lined up with Newcastle's defensive midfielder Alan Smith up front with Michael Owen, which was certainly a choice. Germany played maybe their 8th choice lineup, which showed how up for it they were. Micah Richards continued bursting onto the scene in this one when he hung up a cross for Lampard to head home, but Germany turned the match on its head before half time. The second half was a much of a muchness, a very typical friendly where neither team seemed that interested in providing any spectacle, as once more Die Mannschaft dealt England their first defeat at the new Wembley. But now was not a time to be focusing on the meaningless. There were 5 matches of this qualifying to go. Surely England were not about to miss their first European Championships since 1984. First up was a new Wembley doubleheader with visitors from Israel and Russia. Emil Heskey returned to the national team for the first time since playing France at Euro 2004, and his reintroduction proved instrumental as goals from Wright-Phillips, Owen and seam burster Micah Richards saw England coast to a 3-0 victory. Russia next would provide a meaner test that, if the Three Lions couldn't live up to, would likely end their qualifying hopes. Once more though, England appeared to be turning onto a new leaf, as a second successive 3-0 victory was present, with Owen scoring twice to make it 40 goals for his country. This lively turnaround saw England back up into second, 3 points behind Croatia, but crucially in a qualifying spot. It was in their hands with just 3 matches remaining. Next up would be Estonia at Wembley, and the run of 3-0 victories McClaren's men were on just kept coming, as first half goals from Wright-Phillips, Rooney and a Rahn own goal put England in a brilliant spot before their trip to Moscow. A win in the Russian capital would see them qualify for Euro 2008 and banish the fears from earlier on in the year. And the Three Lions looked well on their way when Wayne Rooney's stunning volley put them into the lead half an hour in. However, a 5-minute period of madness saw Roman Pavlyuchenko score a brace, turning the match on its head and seeing Russia close the gap to England to just 2 points. Worse still is that Russia had a match in hand, meaning once again McClaren's fate was not in their hands again. England would need one of Israel or Andorra to deny Russia a win in order to qualify for Euro 2008. At the next and final international window of 2007, Russia would play their final 2 matches versus Israel and Andorra, whilst England just had Croatia, who had already qualified, at home. Israel was up first for Russia, whilst England played a friendly with Austria. That's not even worth mentioning. McClaren must have been praying to anyone that would listen, and his prayers were answered when Israel went ahead just 10 minutes in. Russia though were pushing hard for a result here and deservedly levelled on the hour mark, with brilliance from Arshavin to provide Billy Aletdinov, who drove home an equaliser. Could Russia now push for a winner? Well, no, Israel were actually the ones to turn up the heat, but their many attempts were being thwarted by Gabrielov in the Russian net. As it stood, it would be in England's hands once more, but they would almost certainly have to beat Croatia. Until the 91st minute changed things once more. With Russia pushing for a winner to qualify themselves for Euro 2008, they got caught short at the back, with Golan beating the offside trap and firing a winner. A crucial winner for England. I mean Israel. McClaren's prayers and prediction had come true. It would all come down to the final match with Croatia, and Russia's last minute defeat meant all the three lions had to do was draw at home to a team who had already qualified. Easy, right? With Russia taking on Andorra, it was roundly expected that they would waltz to victory, which didn't quite happen, but I'll spare the suspense by confirming that Russia did win, meaning it was all on England to ensure they picked up at least a point with Croatia. Even before kick-off, eyebrows were raised with the selection by Steve McClaren. After a spluttering opening run of chop and change by their new manager, McClaren finally settled on a 4-4-2, which England had played for the past 10 internationals until today. He decided in their crucial final match to go safety first, drop one of the strikers and play another holding midfielder in a 4-1-4-1. He insisted to the BBC that it was a 4-3-3, but it just wasn't. Additionally, with Crouch starting as the lone forward, surely Beckham made sense on the right to whip those trademark balls in. Apparently not, as McClaren favoured Wright-Phillips instead. And finally, Paul Robinson had been England #1 for 3 years, until today, when the Spurs keeper was dropped inexplicably for 22-year-old Scott Carson to make his debut. A decision that would come back to bite McClaren just 7 minutes in, as a poor speculative effort from Nico Cruncher bounced straight at Carson's feet and he helped bundle the ball into the net. 5 minutes later, Ivica Olic made it 2, rounding the helpless Carson and sending England into a tailspin. Could they make a revival? With the rain lashing down, second chance Steve, donning his umbrella, needed to think on his feet. At half-time, Wright-Phillips and Barry were off, Beckham and Defoe were on, England were back to their kind of trusty 4-4-2, and Crouch had someone to play off. 12 minutes into the second half, Defoe is fouled and England have a penalty, which was dispatched by Frank Lampard. Game on. 5 minutes on, their equaliser hit when Beckham sent a frankly disgusting cross towards Crouch, who took it down beautifully and smashed home. A truly fantastic leveller, and now all England needed to be was professional. Just see the job through. But this video is not a positive one for England, meaning a winner did come in this one, and it was Petric who found it. Once more, a shot from distance half-heartedly closed down from England that Carson should have stopped. Darren Bent came on to try and rescue it, but he was unable to. England would miss out on qualifying for Euro 2008. McClaren was sacked the following day, becoming England's shortest tenured manager. Now reflecting on this time now, it's important to set the record straight on a few things. The defeat to Croatia in that final qualifying match was overblown. England were missing their entire back four of Gary Neville, Rio Ferdinand, John Terry and Ashley Cole, as well as the front two of Wayne Rooney and Michael Owen. It was always going to be an uphill battle, and in my mind, the England players, for the most part, gave it a good go. The worst performance of the night though was undoubtedly Scott Carson, who never in a million years should have been making his debut. He was just 22 years old, making his debut in the most important qualifier for England in years. But this just epitomised the arrogance of McClaren, the Wally with the brolly as we now remember him. Every chance he got, he was quick to remind the media that he was smarter than them and that he knew what was coming. His overconfidence that England would qualify has made him look even worse in retrospect. His insipid desire to persistently chop and change tactical systems was laughable. Who can forget the disastrous use of three at the back, which England hadn't used in over a decade away to Croatia in a vital qualifying match? Or England barely registering a shot on target over Macedonia? Dropping Beckham and Campbell early on to stamp his authority, only to cowardly return them to the fray without so much of an acknowledgement that he was wrong to do so in the first place. Through every turn he ignored advice from Sir Alex and even his own experienced assistant in Terry Venables, who found himself increasingly marginalised. Never have England had a man who was so full of oneself, so full of ego, that promptly undelivered to this degree. McClaren rightly deserves the title of England's worst ever manager. Since losing the national team job, McClaren has had an up and down career that saw major success in the Netherlands with FC Twente, a mixed spell with Derby County, and failures with Wolfsburg, Nottingham Forest, Newcastle United, Maccabi Tel Aviv, and Queen's Park Rangers. Today he is back in the international arena, this time with Jamaica, where he's got off to a reasonably good start. However, he will always be associated with that England stint, and perhaps more poignantly, that image of him under the umbrella looking lost. The Three Lions would bring in Fabio Capello to replace him, which also ended up being a dismal failure for far different reasons. 200 likes on this video and we will do one on Fabio and his bizarre antics. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, drop your thoughts below. Is McClaren your worst ever England manager? And for now, I will see you very soon.